I've learned that I can still cry and I can give myself a moment and I can show up. I can still have the feelings that I'm having, and then I can do one thing that's going to continue to move the needle, right? I can pray and I can honor him in his memory by mentioning him and talking about the works that he's done, and thinking about the good times that we've had and all the laughters. And I can continue to honor my gifts, because if I don't move forward to do the work that God has called me to do, at that point, I'm not fulfilling my purpose in the world.
Welcome to the Published and Paid podcast, where we share book, business, leadership, and life lessons in 20 minutes or less to help you build a thought leadership brand and business. My name is Jasmine Womack. I'm a former middle school language arts teacher turned seven-figure entrepreneur, and I am glad that you are here. Let's get started.
All right. Welcome back to the Published and Paid podcast. Super excited to be here with you guys today. And today's episode is going to be a little bit different because I didn't script anything. This was just on my heart and my mind to come on and speak about, because for the first time during my entrepreneurial journey, I am navigating death in terms of grief. Now, I've dealt with other types of grief, but I was just able to, compartmentalize that. But recently, my uncle passed, and it happened so swiftly. We found out in August that he had some heart conditions that ended up finding cancer on his lung. Then we found out that it spread to two of his organs. He tried chemo, and the chemo really triggered pneumonia and sepsis, and he was gone like within a week. And so it happened so fast, and it triggered a lot of thoughts for me, because at the time of this recording, I'm 41. I'm the eldest of my siblings, and it, brought into reality, like what potentially the next 5 to 20 years may look like for me. Not speaking this or wishing this, but, I have a host of aunts, I've got grandparents, my husband's parents are aging. And so I think that we are, transitioning into this phase of life where our parents and the people that we grew up with are aging. And now, we're going to find ourselves, experiencing potentially, not now, but of course, like in the next 10 to 20 years or whatnot, experiencing more of this, potentially even becoming caretakers or being in a position where we're going to have to make decisions over our family members and our loved ones' lives and livelihoods. So I've just had like a flood of emotions. At the same time, the kids' activities don't stop. Tutorials don't stop. Practices don't stop. Business demands don't stop. And so I found myself in this very weird position where I'm managing all of that, giving myself real time space to grieve, thinking about the future, what that looks like, what business may even need to look like in order to support and sustain me and create the space that I may need as I go into this next phase of what things could look like. And I've just been thinking, and I'm like, oh, okay, now I understand why I've been led to make certain changes and all of the things. And so the question is, how do you do it? How do you still show up? How do you still serve clients? How do you still do the things that you need to do while also giving yourself space to grieve and process? And so I am not a grief counselor. I am not an expert at this at all. Over the years of doing this work that I've been doing, I have seen grief really take some people out, like where they shut down and where they stop showing up for themselves. And I've already been getting emails, how have you been doing this, that, and the third? And I don't know how it would react, if it were a parent or something like that. I don't know. I can't speak on that. But what I can speak on is how I'm navigating things now. And so that's what this is about. How do you navigate, life and business, and when you have responsibilities of marriage and family, and still processing your emotions, right? And so one of the things that I can say that I have done is to do my best to really focus on those positive moments. Like, my experience with my uncle was a great one. And he was always that person that I could speak to, even when I went to visit him while he was transitioning in the hospital. I walked in the room and he said, "There goes the best publisher in the world." I'm trying not to cry, y'all, but he was always encouraging, always amping me up, always in my ear about things, always helping me to navigate the naysayers. He was that person for me. And so I know that he wouldn't want me to quit. I know that he would want me to continue. And so I've really tried to focus less on the loss and more on appreciating the happy moments. Another thing that I've been doing is really leaning into what the word says. In Ecclesiastes, I believe it's chapter 3, the word speaks about, and when I say the word, I'm referring to the Bible speaks about there being a time and a season for everything under the sun, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to laugh and a time to cry. And so knowing that, and knowing the cycles of life, and knowing that we are all going to transition at some point, it helped me to deal with it better. I can't say how I would have felt if this was a young person or a parent or something like that. But in this instance, I'm like, okay, my uncle's 70. He was 70. He was able to live a very long and fruitful life. He was able to become a minister of the word. He was able to speak life. He, into hundreds of people. He spent his years helping others that needed help. And so in keeping in mind the cycles and the seasons of life, and knowing that just like we all have a day when we're born into this world, we all have a day in which we're going to transition from this world, and none of us know the day or the hour. I'm just thankful that his transition wasn't violent. I'm thankful that, it was for the most part painless. I'm thankful that he was able to choose how he wanted to transition. It was his choice not to fight and to transition, and we were to support him in that. And so those are some of the things that have really, really kept me anchored. And when I felt myself getting very emotional, I'm able to go back to that scripture, to everything under the sun. There's a time and a season for everything under the sun. And if God ordained that this was to be his sunset, then who am I to say otherwise? And let me be thankful for the time that I had with him. Let me harp and remember those happy moments and know that we will be reunited again in spirit, right? That's what I think about. And so while it's not the outcome that I wanted, I know that I have no control over that. And I was talking to my children this morning as I was taking them to school. And because Jair, my son, he was like, "Mom, how are you feeling? Are you okay?" And I was like, Gigi, who is my mother, she was sharing some pictures and videos, and it kind of got me choked up. But I was telling them about the story of David in the Bible, when he and Bathsheba birthed a child. And because of the nature of that birth, the child's life was kind of predestined. And while the child was in transition, in the Bible, it talks about how David grieved, how he poured ashes on his head, how he wore sackcloth, how he did all these things. And then when he got word that the baby had transitioned, he basically dusted himself off. He put on clothes. He got up and he went about living life. And people started asking him, "Your child just died. Why aren't you sad?" And he's basically like, "I grieved. He grieved. He spent his time in mourning and grieving." And then he's like, "Me continuing that isn't going to bring them back." So he got up and kept it moving. Not being callous or forgetting, but understanding that staying in that space wasn't going to help. And so I think about that. And I think about, I give myself, when I feel myself overcome with emotion, I give myself time to a moment to process that, whether it's, just sitting in silence for a while, honoring my uncle, or, shedding a tear. And then I'm like, okay, let's keep it moving. Right. And I understand that grief comes in waves, and you're up 1 minute, down the next, or whatnot. But one thing that I don't want to do is to stay in that space. And I look at that example as from David as an example of how to continue moving forward. Like me allowing depression or sadness to stay in. It's like one thing to honor the life, but me choosing to stay in that space is me choosing not to do the things that my uncle would have wanted to see me doing. So even me filming or recording this podcast is me continuing to honor him and push through, even though I'm on the verge of tears, right? Like I've learned that I can still cry, and I can give myself a moment, and I can show up. I can still have the feelings that I'm having, and then I can do one thing that's going to continue to move the needle, right? I can pray and I can honor him in his memory by mentioning him and talking about the works that he's done, and thinking about the good times that we've had and all the laughters. And I can continue to honor my gifts, because if I don't move forward to do the work that God has called me to do, at that point, I'm not fulfilling my purpose in the world, and I'm not honoring my gifts, and I'm not operating in doing the things that God has called me to do, which would be disobedience. And so there's a fine line between, I believe, you've got to give yourself time and give yourself space to process, but that doesn't mean to quit. That doesn't mean to stop showing up. That doesn't mean to allow yourself to fall into this gray area, right? Because it can be very easy to do that. To sit on the sofa, lay in the sofa, stay in the bed, always thinking about them being gone, instead of honoring the seasons of life, honoring the transition, honoring the life that they've lived, and choosing to focus on the happy moments, and choosing to do the things that your loved one would have wanted to see you doing. And that is how I am navigating grief in this season. I'm thankful for the memories. I'm thankful for the time. I can look back, at least in my experience, we didn't lose any family members during the COVID season or anything. Everyone was trekking. And so for whatever reason, this was his time, and he's lived 70 years. And I can continue to honor that and honor him. And even when I have my moments, even when I have those moments when I want to shed tears, even when I miss him, I can have those moments, honor those moments, be transparent with those moments, and still show up and live my purpose. So for any of you all who may be navigating grief, whether it's grief of a loved one, whether you're grieving a divorce or separation, whether you're grieving a transition from a job or career, know that you can still honor that space while operating and moving towards your next. Okay? And so I love you all. Thank you for listening to this episode. Be sure to subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, and I'll see you guys on the next one.